Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. As you see today, we're going to be just real quickly and informally talking a little bit about Moldova, a little bit about Fulbright, and a little bit about my Fulbright. So this is scheduled for 45 minutes. I think the way I see it is sort of half me boring you, and then the other half questions and answers. So with that, let's go on ahead and get things started. So those of you who may not know me, you know my name, Stephen Youngblood. I'm an associate professor of communications and peace studies. In addition to these duties, I also direct something called the Center for Global Peace Journalism. And in this capacity, I work with journalists, journalism organizations, academics, and students worldwide on peace journalism projects. So this map, I have been in person. I've done projects in 32 countries, another 15 or 20 virtually. I kind of lost track of those. So this map is sort of a rough idea of some of the places that I've been. So as I mentioned, want to begin by talking first of all a little bit about Moldova. I'm guessing it's a subject that until the Russian invasion of Ukraine that no one knew anything about. Well, now I think a lot of people have read at least a little bit about Moldova. So first of all, we'll start by doing what I often do in my classes, and that is to look at a map. So Moldova, you see, is here. Small country, population of 2.5 million, surrounded on three sides by Ukraine, which used to be beneficial, and now it's, of course, a source of much anxiety. Romanian on the other side. So the tradition of the history of Moldova could be an entire session unto itself. Suffice it to say that Moldova's changed hands many times, very traditionally Romanian. In fact, most Moldovans have at least some Romanian descent. Romanian is the official language of Moldova, although Russian is also spoken there. So Moldova was a Soviet republic. When the Soviet Union broke up in the early 90s, Moldova became an independent country. For many years, struggling, deciding whether it wanted to be aligned with Russia or with the West. Now, one of the complicating issues regarding Moldova is a portion of the country. Does this have a map? We'll go back here. Is a portion of the country that's called Transnistria. So right after Moldovan independence, there was a war that was fought. Now I'm zoomed in too much. A war that was fought over this little sliver of land in far eastern Moldova. And so, backed by Russian troops, separatists took this land and dubbed it Transnistria in 1993. So since 1993, this sliver of land has been a territory unto itself. They call themselves an independent republic, but no one in the world recognizes them. Now, one of the complicating factors here is that Transnistria has 1,500 Russian troops. So right on the border, literally 30, 40 miles from the Moldovan capital, you have these 1,500 Russian troops that have always been a menacing force from a Moldovan standpoint. So any discussion about Moldova begins with the fact that some of the Moldova's territory is occupied by Russian troops, 1,500, as I say. And so this is a little bit of the background of Moldova. Now, Moldova right now has a democratic government and a government that really, for the first time, is 100% concentrated on European integration. Because, as I say, this has gone back and forth since Moldova's independence. So, in fact, right now, Moldova is on the fast track to European integration, the same fast track that Ukraine is on. However, because of the war, Moldova is one of the most impacted countries in the world. Now, obviously, because it's surrounded on three sides by Ukraine, the war is right at their doorstep. And there have been some minor incursions, some missiles that have fallen in Moldovan territory, some debris, and so on. But as of yet, Moldova has not been targeted by the Russians. According to the World Bank, and I'm quoting now, Moldova is one of the countries most affected by the war in Ukraine, not only because of its physical proximity, but also because of its inherent vulnerabilities as a small landlocked country with close linkages to both Ukraine and Russia. Now, those linkages with Russia have obviously been strained considerably since the war began. And so this is, I won't read through all of this. This is a report about Moldova from the World Bank and how Moldova's been, as I mentioned, impacted severely by the pandemic, by the refugee crisis, and especially in Moldova by the energy crisis. So it used to be that Moldova got almost all of its energy from Russia. Well, Russia, angered with Moldova's support for Ukraine, has cut that energy off. So now Moldova has to buy their energy from Europe. And this is energy that's much, much more expensive. So as a low-income country, this makes things very difficult for Moldova. Fortunately, the European Union, the US, the World Bank, and others have loaned Moldova money so that they can afford energy. They can afford to heat their homes. But in terms of long-term energy independence, this is a real problem for Moldova. In fact, according to the World Bank, 60% of Moldova's population live in what they call energy poverty, which means they spend more than 10% of their budget on energy bills. So myself, the apartment that I have in Chisinau, the rent is $600 a month. In the center of town, it's a beautiful apartment, great. I've been told during the winter to expect energy bills of $200 to $300 a month. Now, I can pay those, but for the average Moldovan living on much less than I'm living on, I mean, this is a huge, huge burden. Okay, what else about Moldova? A couple of other things before we talk about Fulbright. So Moldova, according to its president, Maya Sandu, who you see here, is in the crosshairs of Russia, not militarily, but certainly in other ways. According to Moldova's president, Russia is aiming for a coup d'etat in Moldova because Russia doesn't like the pro-Western government of President Sandu, who says, the plan included sabotage and militarily trained people disguised as civilians to carry out violent attacks on government building, and the taking of hostages. So we see this pattern of the Russians trying to destabilize Moldova. That's certainly troublesome. In addition, Russia stirs up trouble through a political party called the Shore Party, SHOR. And so this is a Shore Party rally that was held not too long ago in Chisinau. So what the Shore Party has done with Russian backing and even financing is to bus people in from all over the region to give this impression of a groundswell of support against the government. The fact is, the current Moldovan government is popular. So you have the Russians essentially stirring up all kinds of trouble, trying to undermine the government. Now, one of the key ways that they're doing that is through disinformation and propaganda. And indeed, this is one of the focuses of my project in Moldova, is to combat this Russian propaganda. So Moldova is especially vulnerable to Russian propaganda. Why? Well, about 1/3 of the population is Russian speaking. And so there's sort of a built-in sympathy, empathy for Russia in Moldova. And many of these Russian speakers have been consuming Russian language media, a steady diet of Kremlin propaganda for many, many years. So that's one of the issues that I'll be facing as we seek to counter this disinformation. So there's a report that recently came out that's called Blurring the Truth, Disinformation in Southeast Europe. And I'm going to read you just a real short excerpt of this so that you get a feel for the disinformation problem in Moldova. Torn between integrating with the West or remaining in Russia's orbit, Moldova is particularly vulnerable to Russian propaganda. The propaganda circulating in the country focuses particularly on disenfranchising NATO, the EU, and the West in general. This phenomena triggers political polarization within the Moldovan society, something we're all familiar with, which influences the public agenda and decision-making. Moreover, it undermines the security policies and ordinary democratic course set by the current government. In the context of the war with Ukraine, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic earlier, the scale of this phenomena is being felt massively, with news that intentionally misinforms the public and has a significant impact on the public's perception and thus real-life consequences. So in ways that I think are hard for us to imagine, this Russian disinformation is continuously bombarding Moldova. And there's at least a minority of Moldova's population that's believing it. Okay, so against this background, let me back up. So this is the real quick overview of Moldova, of where they are, where they're headed, which is likely European integration in 5 to 10 years. Right now, according to all the experts I've talked to, Moldova is under no military threat from Russia. And indeed, many Moldovans credit Ukrainian resistance for the fact that Moldova is not under Putin's military threat. So it's a very tenuous situation in Moldova, politically, economically, socially, and in terms of the media and disinformation, which is, as I mentioned, my focus. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about Moldova, let me tell you just a little bit about the Fulbright program. Later, I will be giving a program specifically about Fulbright, how to apply for a Fulbright, some tips for a Fulbright. But for right now, I just thought I would give you just a real nickel view of what Fulbright is. So let's take a look at that. It's coming. Oh, by the way, there's one other thing we're talking about Russian disinformation. Here's an example. So you see this picture. This is a picture of a rally in Moldova's capital, Chisinau. And you see the Moldovan Arc de Triomphe in the background. This was a pro-EU rally, a rally supporting the government. And there was something like 70,000 people there. So that's what happened. In fact, I knew people who were there. This was widely reported in international media. Using this same photo, Russian media took this picture and created an entire tale about how this was an anti-government protest, an anti-government, an anti-EU protest. So you have this completely turned around 180 degrees. And that's very typical of the kind of propaganda that you get both in Russia and from Russia directed at Moldova. Okay, now a bit about the Fulbright program. So the Fulbright program has several aspects. So there are student Fulbrights that send graduate students abroad. Then there are also what's called the U.S. Scholar Program. So the U.S. Scholar Program, as the information on the screen says, offers about 400 awards in 135 countries. So what the Fulbright program does is it sends U.S. scholars overseas for research or teaching or research and teaching. So those are the categories that they have. As I mentioned, there are 135 countries. So there's a very broad number of Fulbright awards to choose from. So these are the awards for the current year. And you see various countries, Algeria, Albania, Argentina, and you see all sorts of disciplines, multiple disciplines, or all disciplines, which means they'll take almost anyone. Specific Fulbrights. This one's about history. Let's just peruse a little further. Astronomy, all disciplines, all the visual and performing arts, applied sciences, engineering. So when I say that every discipline is represented somewhere, every discipline is represented somewhere. I mean, no matter what you're looking for, there's a Fulbright award that in that field. And so my process, which began more than a year ago, was first of all to select a country to apply to. And this has to be done very strategically, because one wants to get an award, and one wants an award in a place where your discipline can be especially applicable, where you feel like you can have an impact, and you want to go someplace that's cool, right? So when the time comes for all of you, I hope all of you do, you can try to go to the Sorbonne, or you could try to go to Cambridge, but good luck with that, because there's going to be 100 billion applicants for each of these places. So I'm always suggesting looking for a diamond in the rough. So for my process this time, I looked at 3 countries. I looked at Lithuania, I looked at Montenegro, and I looked at Moldova. Why? Because I knew that I wanted to do something in Eastern Europe to the best of my ability to counter Russian disinformation. So I felt like that's how I could make a difference using my discipline. So I explored all 3 places, and I had, because you never know where you can get an invitation. Well, as it turns out, I think because of the extensive nature of my work, all 3 places were ready to invite me. But I kept coming back to Moldova because I felt like it was most under the gun, literally and figuratively, and because I've worked in Moldova before. In fact, my second language is Romanian, strangely enough. So I applied for the Fulbright in August last year. It's a several-step process, and I received the final notification on March 31st that I received the Fulbright Award. And then there's a whole bunch of other steps that you take that lead me to this point where I'm getting ready to go. So what will I be doing in Moldova? So in Moldova, oh, there we go. So in Moldova, I'll be attached to the state university. Now, what's really cool is that I will be a guest lecturer. So I'll be popping in for a class period or two in a whole bunch of different classes. Not only does that get me exposed to a great number of students, it means I don't have to grade papers for a year. I know, don't kill me. That's wonderful. I'll also be working with an organization called the Centru Media pentru Tineri, which is a youth media center. I've worked with them in the past, and they're wonderful. They have all sorts of seminars and workshops and so on for high school students. So I'll be working with them as well. In addition to the Independent Journalism Center in Moldova and the Moldova Journalism School, both of which do short coursework for professional journalists. So I'll be working with professional journalists in Moldova. In addition, I'll be doing some things regionally. So I already have invitations to Bosnia, to Belgium, and I hope to be able to do some short courses or workshops in Romania, Georgia, and maybe in Lviv. Don't tell my wife, but that might be a possibility too. And I'm a Rotarian, and I've been in touch with the Rotary Club of Chisinau. So I'll be meeting with them and doing Rotary stuff there as well. So before we get to questions, let me invite you to follow me as I begin my work in Moldova. You see my blog, which I'll be regularly updating with all sorts of information about what I'm doing. Also linked to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. You see my email address. Feel free to drop me a line anytime and say, how are you doing? Or I just read this about Moldova. What do you think? Just feel free to stay in touch. Even though I'm technically on sabbatical this year, I'm not one of those people who's going to run shrieking into the streets if I get an email from someone at Park University. So at this point then, I'd like to finally pipe down and give you all a chance to ask some questions.